Hello and welcome to Loneliness and You, a podcast on the research and experience of loneliness. I'm your host, Axel. My guest today is Dan Whitener. After over a decade of performing and recording chart-topping bluegrass music with several bands in the New Jersey tri-state area, touring regionally and internationally, and many exciting opportunities including TV appearances and movie placements, Dan Whitener has recently stepped away from the road to spend more time at home and find a new balance. He's currently studying for a master's degree in social work while raising children and is planning to return to the music industry equipped with the tools to address issues of mental health facing working musicians. Dan, welcome. I'm so pleased to have you.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Dan, we invite our guests to bring something to their interviews that represents their own experiences of their environment and of loneliness in that environment as a conversation starter. So what have you brought us?
Well, I just getting set up for this interview. I thought the easiest and simplest thing would be to just bring this microphone here that I'm speaking into. I'm speaking with you right now. And just to say a little bit about it, this is a microphone that I've used in the studio as well as on stage. And I thought that it kind of encapsulated a lot of what it's like to be a musician. When we think of musicians as professional musicians, we think about performing live and recording in the studio. And a lot of it kind of goes right through this little piece of hardware right here.
Right. And so therefore you have a special relationship, I take it, with this microphone, because this is what channels your soul into something that other people can then hear and experience.
Yes, it does, and it's very satisfying to do. However, it is really very much it's a one-way device for one thing. It can feel like a communication tool, and it is, but it's a sort of an unusual kind of communication, and I think this is something that we're all starting to grapple with more and more as we all have not just cameras, but also microphones and speakers and all kinds of stuff right there in our pocket more and more. I mean, this is a pretty nice microphone, so hopefully I'm sounding okay out there, and I take that seriously. But everybody's got access to this sort of thing nowadays, and so I think it maybe is worth thinking about, not just for musicians, but for all of us, the effect of that. I was recently reading and attending a presentation on the book The Anxious Generation, which talks about this epidemic of loneliness in the youth. And I really was seeing a lot of things in there that I was identifying with, like the idea of what was it? In the real world, you have these one-on-one, like we're talking right now, you and I, we're having a conversation. I love that. But up on stage, I have, what's called a one-to-many communication. I'm up there and I'm singing and I'm talking, and I'm not getting a whole lot back in the way of meaningful communication. I mean, applause is great, don't get me wrong, but I often would much rather have that 5-minute conversation after the show when you go out to the merch table and you're signing things and somebody comes up and says, "Great show," which I've heard. But here's how the song really connected with me. I would much rather hear that, and that's often for me the antidote to the peculiar loneliness that you can feel on stage.
Yeah, right. I mean, I'm observing that, the microphone or, the mediated form of communication that, it's in many ways wonderful. Like, we couldn't easily have this conversation now if that weren't possible. But it's this weird thing where on the one hand, it's mediated. There's so many cues we're not picking up about each other right now, physical bodily cues. But at the same time, it's also weirdly intimate. At the same time, it's kind of more intimate than a normal conversation because the normal boundaries that we naturally, adhere to sort of somehow don't apply. Do you think that's right?
Absolutely. I mean, when you think about the technology of microphones and how it sort of works, I mean, when you're in an acoustic space together, if I were to sound like this to you, I would have to be basically speaking right into your ear. And that would be such an uncomfortable physical experience. You wouldn't do that. Or if you did, it would probably imply things about the nature of our relationship. And you and I have just met. That kind of intimacy, I'm already fairly close. I'm getting the benefits of what you call proximity effect. Proximity effect with a microphone, you start to hear more of this bass that can be a really exaggerated effect the closer you get to any microphone. And that's just, yeah, it's an odd thing. It's a really odd thing. It can accentuate some of these aspects of communication, and just it can sort of distort them in weird ways.
Yeah, I agree. Like when you just did that right now, I intuitively sort of took a step back. Like I did sort of that.
Yeah, but you're on headphones, so you can't step away. That's another thing too. The way the headphones are set up, depending on what your volume level is like. I think about that in life too, in acoustic situations on stage. This is probably another item I could have held up. I have my molded earplugs right here, which are a great way to kind of reduce some of the overwhelm, just general sensory overwhelm of loud sound or constant sound or annoying sound in acoustic spaces, is to put some of those in. So managing sound, is of course a big part of my job, but it extends outside of the musical performance space and into kind of the day to day.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, as a seasoned clubber, like I have these things because I go to a lot of techno events, and you definitely, need your earplugs
You
for those.
should. Everybody should, just to
Absolutely.
put the plug out there
And
into
not
the world.
only when after the tinnitus has started, right?
No. By the time it started, it's far too late. You've already done permanent damage to your hearing. No, please, everyone, try to invest in some level of good hearing protection, because there's a lot of noise out there in the world today.
Absolutely. Yeah. Let's perhaps at this stage listen a little bit to what you do with the microphone. So we're going to listen to an excerpt of a song that, you performed with your band Gangstagrass, and it's called Nickel and Dime Blues.
Corner store just to get a little bottle of pills, 'cause the man on the television told me there's a cure for all my ills. Well, I walked on up to the counter and I told him what I had. Now he said, you ain't got no money, you can't afford to be feel so bad. Oh, can you spare a nickel, brother? Can you spare a dime? Need a couple more dollars now just to get me on down the line.
Okay, so let's talk about it. What's going on in here? What's going on with the nickel and the dime and the pills and everything? Yeah, tell us about it.
Oh gosh, yeah, there's so much. So to very briefly introduce the concept of this band, Gangstagrass, I've been playing and touring internationally and nationally, regionally, and recording many albums with this band for over 10 years. And what it is, in addition to just being, a great, fun live band experience, it's actually the bringing together of two seemingly separate genres of music, of American music, that are often perceived as not only different but kind of opposite ends of a social societal spectrum. We often think of these genres, bluegrass as more of a white music and hip hop as more of a black music, and various other cultural markers. But what's been really great, really unifying about it culturally is we play this music for people, and oftentimes it really brings large groups together, and seemingly different groups together, and people have this wonderful realization and experience in the live space that, hey, wait a minute, I like this, you like this, maybe we can all kind of get along. I hate to oversimplify that, but I know we're limited on time. But it's been a fantastic experience. And so in this song, you hear me start off singing, and then shortly after, and playing the banjo, which I play, and then shortly after I sing and we all sing together, then one of the MCs comes in and starts rapping, which is just a tremendous way. I've always enjoyed writing songs in this group, because what I will bring in is sort of this bluegrass part, which is I'll sing a verse, we'll sing a song, and then giving that theme over. It really is like a conversation. It's written in the style of a conversation, where then the MC will come in and he'll rap his verse, which he's written. It can be as a response or an elaboration on the theme. There's a second MC, so he'll take his turn later on and provide kind of his own personal perspective and a different take. And there's a number of songs like that I've written for them, and it's just tremendous. It's a great cultural conversation. And so this song in particular is about poverty, which of course is a it's both an isolating experience, but it's also a very broadly shared one, where a lot of people, when I'm writing for this group, I think about, the groups of people who might listen to bluegrass, might listen to hip hop. What are some of these issues that maybe we can all have in common, and we can all say something about poverty? Poverty, touches a lot of us. It touches people in rural areas, in urban areas, differently. But everybody's got something to say about that, and so that's been just such a rewarding thing about playing music, but with that band in particular.
Yeah, and it's got, when one listens to this music, there's a particular kind of energy that results from bringing together these seemingly sort of disparate strands of music and of society, right? It's like something genuinely new comes out of it. I had that experience when listening to it.
Absolutely, and I think a lot of that too. And I often say this to people, as a musician. One of the concerns that musicians might initially think is, oh, I don't know about this fusion stuff. I worry that I would have to somehow diminish my part of what I bring in, and I wouldn't really be doing real bluegrass banjo if I was playing it in this hip hop context. And what we found simply through doing it and trying it as an experiment is that that's not the case, and that you can really bring your whole self musically into a project like that. And the reason I tell that story is because I think that that's a larger conversation around diversity and around collaboration and bringing people together, is that, well, I want to be accepting of others, but I worry that if I try to integrate myself into that larger context, that somehow I'm going to lose part of myself. And I think that's a big factor in how people culturally isolate, become isolated and become lonely, is that worry about the loss of self. And which makes a lot of sense, and I understand that. But from my own personal experience, I have to say that's not how it has to go. And there are ways, I think a lot of the energy of this music is that it shows people being fully themselves individually, but doing it in a way that can functionally integrate with everybody else in the band.
Yeah, right. I mean, philosophers think about the self from a very different angle a lot. And, one way of thinking about it is that, the self is this really isolated core thing and everything else just builds on it. And, but fundamentally, there's just this unit and it's you and there's nothing that connects it. But you can also think that, the self itself is a social thing, right? That you couldn't be yourself without, having other people there.
Absolutely.
That in order to be a self, you need to be able to distinguish between me and somebody else. And, in order to do that, the other people have to be already there, right? Yeah.
Oh, so many thoughts on that. I mean, I'm going to school for social work right now, but even before I got to that, when I toured internationally, and this is around the time of, well, it's over the last 8-10 years. There's been a lot of conversation politically, nationally in this country, and then internationally about sort of what it is to be American, what American identity is. Lots of conversation about that, and I often feel that if you haven't traveled internationally, or if you don't really know anything about other countries, I think it's challenging to, how can you really say what American identity is without any kind of context or contrast? Because a lot of what people say when they talk about, oh, my American identity, you may be talking about shared universal human traits and values and experiences that actually a lot of other countries do. In fact, some other countries may even embrace these, better or more effectively than we do. And of course, there are those things that are maybe singularly American, but you couldn't really know that unless you had a few, points of comparison, I think.
Yeah, definitely. That's right. Certainly my experience, I'm European, and I've lived in the States for an awfully long time. And I have learned so much about what it is to be European that I could only have learned by virtue of not living there. So I totally second that. That's right. Yeah. So I want to talk to you more about your touring experience. But before we do that, just 5 minutes more on music itself. I want to know from you, so, you make music and you use that, in the best possible sense to bring people together. What is it about music and about music in particular that has this power to bring people together? What is it?
Well, there's definitely a philosophical aspect to it, right? And it starts all the way back in songwriting, all the way back where you're accessing a part of yourself, some sort of emotional experience, or maybe poetical insight, And I don't like to say insight in some grand way. I really just mean, you sort of something occurs to you. You have a shower thought, while you're in the shower, while you're driving, while you're doing something else, and your consciousness is distracted. Something clicks and occurs to you, or you're processing some particularly painful or challenging emotional experience, and you have this thought, this idea, and you get that into the form of a song somehow with some application of craft and technique. And then you go around, you start to express that. And you're really, again, this is not a communication in the conventional sense, like we're sitting here. I mean, it's sort of similar. I'm kind of monologuing. I have a tendency to go on for a while. So that's what a song is. It's 2 or 3 minutes. I'm up on stage, and then by the end of it, as I've communicated my thought, you get some applause, you get some feedback, because hopefully, and this is the philosophical part, I don't think it's positivism. I don't think it's this idea that like there's a universally knowable truth, but there is maybe more like it's kind of a solipsism. It's all I know is what's in my own heart, my own experience. But then you start to get the sense that like I just expressed something that's very true and deeply meaningful to me. And now you're nodding and you're smiling and you're giving me feedback. That tells me that maybe there is some universality to the concept that I just shared. And that can be very disarming as well. We've done work on depoliticizing people, depolarizing people politically, I should say, and bringing people to a place where they can be more communicative. And often we've found that's more successful through music than other ways. I think when we look at political polarization, a lot of that, it depends on how you're communicating or how you're, I don't want to say communicating, how you're haranguing, how you're screaming, and hunkering down in your feelings. Music is often an antidote to that, to a lot of unproductive and harmful ways of communicating. So that's been a lot of it for me for a long time, and it kind of emanated out from that place of it makes me feel good. I know that about myself, and then to kind of bring it around to people and say, well, it seems to work for them too. That's a really powerful thing. It's a really powerful thing to start from that place of self and then realize that it applies to others too.
Yeah. And the body seems to play a huge role, right? So, it always strikes me that, music, as opposed to say, fine art or literature, music goes for the jugular. Like, it goes for sort of the bodily rhythm. And that's what makes it so universal. I was in Ethiopia a while ago, and I listened to some street music there, and it was, not music I was familiar with at all, but it totally sort of drew me in because it did something with my body that I could recognize. I think, do you think that some of the power of music just resides in that, in this bodily connection that picks up something that's universal to all of us?
Yes, absolutely. And there's much more that can be said about the biology and sort of, evolutionarily the question of why are we capable of making and perceiving music? Why is that? What function does that serve? And when you look at some of the biology and some of the beneficial effects that it has to just sort of establish and hear and feel a rhythm, the direct measurable effects on the nervous system, on the cardiovascular system, this is clearly a real thing that's happening to you. It's not just in your head. Not that would be a diminishing of something, but it really is. It's in your head. It's in your body, and so clearly there's an evolutionary value. Otherwise, why would we all? What's the point of it? There really is something to music, to all the performing, the physical live performing arts. There's always something there, I think, that connects us. So it's tremendous.
It is tremendous. I couldn't agree more. Let's talk a little bit about your touring experience. So you were on the road, you said, for 10 years with Gangstagrass. I imagine that was amazing, but also really challenging. Tell us about it.
Yeah. It really, to condense 10 years down into 10 minutes or less, it's, so just thinking about the bodily experience, I often say, and I've heard many people say, I would play music for free. I would perform for free. loading the van, unloading the van, spending 5 hours a day in the van, spending 24 hours a day for several days in a row, multiple weeks away from your home, cramming into wherever you're staying, cramming into a backstage area, being with the same people for a sort of a unusually long and focused and intense period of time if you're traveling with a band. Or, I mean, we'll mention briefly the one tour that I did solo. I have a lot of respect for people who can do that. I cannot. I will never tour solo if I have a choice. That was a peculiar form of social isolation for me. I know there's a lot of ways to do it that are healthy for people who can, sit with their thoughts for hours at a time. But that was I'm not built for that. I think the thing that sustained me through touring really was the fact that I was touring with a band. So there was that social element, even as strange as that is. But the whole experience of it, it's ups and downs, it's excitement and terrible boredom and drudgery, and it's the kind of job where if you kind of look at like your hourly rate, depending on what you include as your work hours, that can be pretty abysmal. But on the flip side, it's travel. You get to visit places. I've been to Europe several times, and I've been significantly all over this country. And this is a huge and varied and diverse and deep country. And I don't need to demand that people travel abroad, leave America to learn a lot. I think that simply traveling interstate within your same state, within your county, just to different communities near you, in a lot of ways we are still unfortunately culturally segregated, and not just by race but by class, by socioeconomic status. And music has been a passport for me. It's been this amazing key where I suddenly have a reason to be there. I'm not just randomly going around dropping myself into people's conversations and lives and communities. There's something there that's a conversation starter, where I get to say, hi, I'm the guy from Gangstagrass, and all of a sudden I get this amazing communication. Now, the cost of that, of course, is that I haven't been home for the last 10 years, setting down roots and being part of my own community. But it's a trade-off, and it's one that can be worthwhile, because instead of that, you get these profound connections with all sorts of people all over the place. And some of those can be lasting connections. Some of them can be more like, well, I'll see you now, and I'll see you maybe 3 months from now, and we'll pick up, where we left off. I have many of those relationships. So the social experience of touring is really interesting and worth a lot more thought, just because of the sort of the disparity. You do give up a lot meaningfully, which is, hey, I've chosen to step away from doing that. I'm making a different decision at this point. But what you get for it is tremendously valuable, which is part of why I want to provide support for those musicians that are doing it. Just because I'm not engaging in it right now doesn't mean I don't fundamentally believe that there's something of deep value there experientially, for musicians and for everybody that we serve.
Yeah, I mean, I have no doubt I'm not a musician, but that seems obvious that that's something that's deeply valuable. But as you just said, it comes at a massive cost, or can do, to the people who are doing it. And so you're now interested in supporting these people. In what way?
Well, so there are, I guess on one hand, I would say there are those necessary challenges, like we're just talking about travel. Look, travel is challenging. It's hard. And so I think supporting people in that, finding a healthy balance of, I'm going to spend some time away from home and some time at home. Maybe I can make the road feel a little bit more like home. I know people who travel with family or live out of their van or whatever it is. Everybody finds a different balance, and a different balance at different points in their career and life. And some of those challenges are just baked in. They're just part of the transaction. So taking that as a given, there are a number of other challenges that don't really. It doesn't have to be quite so hard as it is. even looking before the way that the pandemic fundamentally reshaped the way that we think about music and live performance, which it did, there's just a number of issues that are baked into the music industry, some of which have been around certainly as long as recorded music has been around, which is about 100 years. A number of them kind of go in parallel with the various civil, social issues of our age. So we overlap with all sorts of things. You know, musicians are every kind of person. So musicians can be wealthy, can be poor. Musicians can be healthy, can be ill, old, young, just anybody in society. And so you have all of those issues that people already have with them, that comes with them into their music and into their careers. In addition to that, though, there are real issues around addiction, substance use, mental health, loneliness. You know, as we're talking about, and loneliness, I think, can be then exacerbated and have a vicious cycle with some of these other things. Just taking substance use as a clear example of something that I think we could change about the industry. That does not have to be this way. You ask any musician who is at the beginning of their career or who have ever began their career if they've ever been paid in free drink tickets, right? Not just given them, but in fact that was basically their compensation. Sorry, we can't give you money, which would be great, but since we are a bar or a brewery or a venue that primarily gets their money through selling alcohol, even performing arts venues, a lot of their income does derive from concession sales. So, that's the thing that we sell, and we've got it. And here you go. Here's is five good? Is five good, Mr. Surgeon General? No, I don't think it would be good to give a person 5 drink tickets and then kind of expect them to derive their sense of self-worth and professional satisfaction off of, if I better use them all. We think to ourselves. So it's right from the beginning. There are really tremendous issues baked into how music and particularly alcohol, but substance use in general, really tend to go hand in hand in problematic ways. And I don't have numbers on this stuff yet, but it's broadly anecdotal. These are experiences that we all face and engage with in some way.
Yeah.
I forget if that answered the question, but it's a really important issue.
It is a really important issue, yeah. Our time is already up almost, unfortunately. Before I leave you, I would like to talk a little bit more about possibly the most famous song that you have produced and performed, and we're going to go out with a little section of that song. Yeah, do you wanna talk about "We Are Gonna Be Okay"?
We are.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say, I think one of the most important factors for musicians anywhere is, that amount of social support that you receive, whether it's from peers, family, friends, loved ones. So I really do have to credit my wife for generally supporting me and being incredibly understanding throughout, my entire career thus far. I also have to credit my wife for writing the lyrics to this song. It is, until we had kids, certainly the proudest thing, that we had worked on and created together was this. It's a wonderfully meaningful song to me for that reason. And we had worked it up. I was going into the studio to record an EP that this ended up on. I was up in Canada with some tremendous musicians there. I had some things I'd written, and I had kind of thought, she'd sent me these lyrics, so I thought, let me see if I can't put something together with this on the fly with the musicians that I have, who were incredible. And it really came out of that experience of being in the studio. Everything else, I had completely written out in my head. I knew exactly what I wanted them to sing, what I wanted them to do, da 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 da, and they're just going to be sort of my puppets, and we'll do that. It'll be great. But this song really came together in a much more instantaneous, collaborative way that was receptive to here are the people here. It was more maybe more social in that way and less a product of my own mind. Add to that it was the lyrics from my wife, and so ideal in the way that it came together. And I just thought, let me give this a crack, and I'll take it home and she'll hear it, and it'll be very sweet. Like, oh, okay, you recorded my song. That's so nice. But it ended up being this really, I'm as proud of it as I am of any other song that I've ever written or been involved with. And the short story about where it went from there was that at one point, the director Spike Lee he put out an open call for music for a project he was working on at the time, which was a remake of his original movie, She's Gotta Have It. And so I submitted it just again, kind of on a whim of that moment. And I ended up receiving a phone call from him in person, and we ended up talking, and he said, I'm interested, but do you think that you could try reworking the words a little bit, because it's We Are Gonna Be Okay is about sort of the experience of two people, a couple, and the guy's trying to find work, and they're just trying to make it work. They're just up against sort of life's challenges. And he was thinking at the time, he listened to it and he loved it, and he thought maybe you could make it more about we in the larger sense, like we all are going to be okay, societally. And I said, yes, sir, Mr. Spike Lee. And I hung up the phone, and 24 frantic hours later, I think I spent a couple of hours with my wife on a lunch break. I went and got her at work, rewrote the lyrics a little bit, went into the city to the studio of a friend of mine, frantically re-recorded some of the lyrics. He put them together, and we sent it over. 24-hour turnaround. And then I didn't hear from him for a year. The project came out. He didn't end up using the song. And then I got another phone call a year later from him again. And he said, hey, I love the song. I've been enjoying it. I've been listening to it. Sorry I couldn't get it on that project. I said, that's okay. And he said, but I want to get it on my next project. And I said, all right, we'll get it on the next project. Let's see what this next project. It's something called Black Klansman. And I was actually already a little bit familiar with this story. So immediately, my eyes lit up. I'm on this call. I'm like, that sounds pretty good. And as soon as I hung up, I went and I read back up on it, the story of Ron Stallworth, this police officer in Colorado Springs, black police officer, the first black police officer in Colorado Springs, who immediately decides to infiltrate the Ku Klux Klan.
Wow.
Over the phone. And he did have a white police counterpart go in and do the in-person stuff. Just a remarkable story, directed by one of the most significant film directors ever, certainly of our time. And just of projects that you could be involved with. It's definitely, it'll be the greatest honor I can really think of in terms of that, just the overall significance of that. It was such a wonderful thing, and to have that song go on to we spent a lot of months sort of pinching ourselves until the thing came out and we went and saw it, and it was just absolutely incredible, and a real honor. And I've always been grateful for that. But frankly, I was already grateful to have made the song, even if none of that came about, even if I ended up having one conversation with Spike Lee on the phone, and and I've been fortunate to have other experiences like that throughout music. But it always comes back to those elements, not so much of, hey, look at me. Oh, look at this great thing. Oh, that's so cool. I'm really cool. It's so much more about the things that you really do deeply value, and the connections with people. Interpersonally, socially, those have just been the most deeply meaningful things to me. And I hope that the message of the song itself also kind of comes through. As I always like, sharing that with people, just to say, look, you might not believe it. That's okay if you don't believe it right now. But I hope that gives you something. And because of the popularity of the song, I'm so thankful that it's gotten out there, through the algorithm to find more ears.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's, of course, a message we very much need in our contemporary time. Dan, it was such a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much for making time to us. Yeah, wonderful.
Absolutely. I appreciate the conversation, Axel. Thank you so much.
Take care. Thank you for listening to Loneliness and You, a podcast on the research and experience of loneliness. My guest today was Dan Whitener. Join the conversation by emailing us at lonelinnesspod@gmail.com or following us on Instagram and TikTok at loneliness.pod. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, review, and subscribe to Loneliness and You wherever you get your podcasts. Loneliness and You is produced by Stacey Goldman and myself, Axel Seaman. This episode was engineered and edited by Steve Salina. Our introductory sound was designed by Dave Meckin, and our logo art is by Paul Fisher-Davies. The podcast is financially supported by Bentley University. Thanks for listening. Talk soon.